communications and a spokesperson at the United States mission to the United Nations. Jonathan, thank you for being here today. It was a wild week in Washington last week, so a lot of the amazing things that were happening over at the UNGA didn't make news. We want to hit some of those points if we can. We just heard the president talking about Saudi Arabia, how they should pay up. They do have a lot of money. What do you think about the president's point?
The president does have a point in that Saudi Arabia is a very wealthy nation, and so are the other Gulf states there. They have so much revenue coming from oil, and they have healthy economies, so they indeed should be taking care of themselves. Now, Saudi Arabia spends a huge portion of its annual budget on military. It buys a lot of weapons from the United States and is currently involved in a conflict in Yemen trying to eradicate a rebellion by Houthi militia that are funded by Iran, so they have their hands full militarily, and they could use U.S. support, which we provide in terms of military advice and weaponry. But, at the end of the day, we do have to be careful with what we're doing. At the same time, we also have to make sure that we don't alienate our ally, because Saudi Arabia is on the front line of trying to push back at Iran, which has been such a terrible force within the Middle East. So, you can talk tough with your ally, but just don't make sure you hurt their cause, which is actually your cause, too.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point there at the beginning of what you said, and here's a little something that the president had said at the UNGA earlier. Now it's last week.
We defend many of these nations for nothing, and then they take advantage of us by giving us high oil prices. Not good. We want them to stop raising prices. We want them to start lowering prices, and they must contribute substantially to military protection from now on.
This kind of overall goes with something the president's been doing since he entered office, talking about asking other countries to step up and pay where they can, to not have the United States paying as much. And as we were just talking about military spending there, he's hitting the economy and what various countries do to control something so vital as our energy supply all around the world.
OPEC historically, and Saudi Arabia is a member of OPEC, and a lot of nations, Russia as well, and the Iranians, they've fixed the prices on the price of oil for decades, and it has caused extreme pain for Americans at the gas pump. Luckily, now we're a fairly self-sufficient, in fact, we're the largest exporter now and developer of fossil fuels, so we're capable of emboldening our position now and making sure that we take care of our citizens and try to set a course that makes sense. But at the same time, our economy still is reliant, as are other Western nations and the Japanese and others, China too, on oil that is provided by OPEC. So we have to make sure that we keep the prices at a level that makes sense for, ensuring that the economy's buzzing. Energy is everything in terms of the strength of an economy. And if we feel pain at the gas pump, it's no fun. And OPEC manipulating the amount of oil on the market by holding back production and other ways to do it and rigging the system, there needs to be a fairness instilled in that. Luckily, again, we are more independent, so we don't have to kowtow to things that they're doing. We can assert ourselves now.
And sticking with the Middle East for a moment, Iran. The president calling out Iran very harshly there at the UNGA over the course of the last week. But Iran pushing back against the president's call that they're essentially a bad actor and saying it's the United States that have been isolated. Your thoughts on that back and forth and how that was viewed by the world community as well?
Iran used very hard a point that actually the Europeans helped them with. Just the night before, the evening and night before the president went to the podium in the UN General Assembly, the European leader chief, the Russians, the foreign ministers of other European countries, the Chinese got together, huddled together, and trying to work out a mechanism by which U.S. sanctions on Iran could be circumvented, at least, so that German, French, English, Russian, Chinese businesses can trade freely with Iran without getting penalized by tough U.S. sanctions, especially the tougher sanctions on Iran's oil sector that are going to kick in at the beginning of November. And that, of course, the Iranians exploited, saying, look how isolated the United States is. All these other countries, all the other signatories of the Iran deal want to stick in. They understand that we're doing our part in following through with the letter of what the Iran nuclear deal is. And President Trump and his administration are isolated, and how dare them? And look at how shameful this is. At the same time, these very nations have to think about what they're doing. You're supporting a regime in Tehran that oppresses its own people, that's wreaking havoc in the Middle East, that's meddling with all sorts of military experiments, ballistic missile firing. We don't know, in fact, whether Iran has stopped its nuclear program because the IAEA inspectors, the International Atomic Energy inspectors, can't get into Iranian military sites to actually figure out whether they're actually coming clean with what they're claiming. So there's this tough controversy going on. So why are these European countries and their stockholders, the people who actually finance these companies, why are they supporting a regime and trying to circumvent U.S. sanctions when the regime is really not a great place, great government after all?
Alas, we are out of time. We could talk to you for weeks about this, about just what happened at the UNGA. But Jonathan Wachtel, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. Mike?
Molly, fascinating discussion. Days after a shark attack on the East Coast, it's happening again, this time out west. The details on the victim and the response straight ahead. A Fox News alert, a teenager is fighting for his life after a shark attack north of San Diego. It happened yesterday as he was lobster diving. Jeff Paul is following the story from our Los Angeles bureau. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Mike, the coastline and water at the beach where this all happened right now is shut down. Lifeguards and police are worried that the shark that attacked this 13-year-old boy could still be out there swimming nearby. This all happening about 25 miles north of San Diego. Authorities say the victim was lobster diving with his youth church group. At some point, a shark estimated at 11 feet long attacked him. There were a few good Samaritans in the area who soon realized what was happening and rushed over to help the victim.
I hop in the kayak, we swim over to him, throw him on the kayak. Once we get him on the kayak, we could really see what happened. Luckily, we got him out of the water because once we threw him up on the kayak and started heading in, that's when I looked back and a shark was behind the kayak. He didn't want to give up yet.
First responders say the Good Samaritans got the boy out of the water and to shore, likely saving his life. Authorities haven't released the name of the victim, only saying that he's 13 years old. They tell us he had surgery and is in critical condition. Now, lifeguards are hoping to have the beach open by tomorrow. They're also working to identify what type of shark was involved, but say seeing a shark in that area isn't rare. It's home to many different species of sharks who are non-threatening. Mike?
Jeff, our thoughts and prayers go out to that young man and his family. Thanks very much, Jeff Paul.
Yeah, it's really frightening. Thankfully, those kind of attacks are pretty rare, but we did see 2 over the summer on Cape Cod. 1 was fatal. So hopefully he does pull through all right. Well, that does it for us. We will be back at 4 o'clock.
More news from Washington with Leland Vittert and Ebony K. Williams right after this.